And they're like, oh, wait. I said, go get the thing, confirm it with the DA people first. It has to do with Emma Powell or something. And is this in now live? Cheer the whole time. Now you owe me a bag.
You see, I'll give you.
Okay, cool.
Thank you so much for joining us on Ubuntu Radio. Special broadcast from the G20 Leaders Summit is where the President Cyril Ramaphosa of the Republic of South Africa is leading the delegation of South African ministers and senior officials of government, and really the whole public service. Looking at what are some of the issues that are going to be discussed by heads of state and government of the G20 countries. So it's the summit right here at Nasrec and Expo Centre. We thought we should bring in some analysis as well, because this is what we're going to do throughout the 2 days. Well, Sanusha Naidu, thank you so much for your time. And just in terms of, we have spoken to you in a number of times building up to the G20. Just outline for us. Now it's culminating to what will be a successful G20. I've already make that conclusion, given what the president was saying this morning, that we should definitely pat ourselves in the back to say that indeed we have pulled it through.
Absolutely, Charlie. I think the moment that we are here, it has finally arrived. And you can't ignore the feeling of that this is an affirmation of South Africa.
Yeah.
Just looking at the leaders that walked down that red carpet and was received by President Ramaphosa is a sense of, saying, we affirm you and we affirm this summit. Irrespective of whatever happens in this closed deliberation, whether or not they are able to get to where they need to get to, and by implication, the fact that they are discussing something means that there's a zero draft. Right? And so they're discussing the zero draft document. But I think we have to applaud South Africa for going through a very tumultuous process, having to deal and firefight and be able to understand that this is not just something that we do in a vacuum. We've got to be constantly in a consultative forum, because we as South Africa, we are chairing, we are the president of the summit. So we have to make sure that we manage the process in a way that makes others feel inclusive, hence the theme of the summit.
Inclusivity,
right? Inclusivity, equality, sustainability. That I think captures the essence of what South Africa strive towards in the summit. So I don't know how you felt, but it was very emotional watching all of the months of discussion, all of the back and forth, all of the tensions, all of the taking the body blows of the summit, right? And all of the issues around it, and saying, we got here and we did it. And it doesn't mean that we have failed ourselves. In fact, if anything, we have achieved something unachievable, and we've done it.
Yeah. Now, let's look at, you're part of the Think 20, the Think 20 that has South African Institute of International Affairs, Institute of Global Dialogue. You still have the Pan-African Thought, the Institute for Pan-African Thought in the University of Johannesburg. The Think 20 Summit also, which is an ideas bank, I mean, for the G20. Thematic issues that South Africa has put on the agenda, just energy transition. There is a number of issues of critical minerals as well. Just to see the plethora of heads of states and government, even from the European countries who are members of the G20, coming through to this summit. And none of them, most of them coming, not even sending their deputies. And just to see UK Prime Minister here and fresh president. And you ask yourself, really, countries that are not here at that level really have missed out, because some of the critical core issues that South Africa has already put on the agenda, not only for the African continent, but also for the globe, that we need to now rethink how we should re-engage each other on global economic issues as well. This is significant for South Africa and for the continent as well.
Absolutely. And I think you mentioned the EU, which is such an important market for us.
Yeah.
And then before the summit, there was the EU-South Africa bilateral. And when we heard the president of the EU Commission talk about a reliable partner, talk about clean trade, and talk about the areas that South Africa and the EU will find nexus on in terms of economic engagement and so forth. But I think also we mustn't lose sight of the fact that we have some members of ASEAN here, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and they're an important actor and in the global economy. They're an important market. Yeah. We have Vietnam here, which is quite important, and to my mind, I've been listening to friends and family who are finding Vietnam to be quite an interesting place to visit. And I think we should start building up that kind of bilateral relationship with Vietnam. There's engineers and other people from South Africa working and living in Vietnam. Friends of mine who live in Vietnam say, we want more South African products on the shelves. We like your wine, we like this. So we can navigate some of the tensions with the EU and have other kind of outlets for our stuff. But I think to really contextualize what this combination means, is that this is about a world that's in a state that is in an inflection point, and then we're trying to find our way in terms of how do we re-engineer it? How do we find the traction to say that what happened 80 years ago, and just to bring that into the significance of the UN at 80, what happened 80 years ago, we have to think about the change, and change is always difficult to embrace, but it's a necessary change.
Yeah.
It's something that it's no longer just sufficient to talk about change. We've got to now embrace that change of necessity, and I think this is where we are. And I think that's why having South Africa be the last country in the G20 club to host this G20 is really interesting. But it comes at a time where, we're going to be momentous, but it's going to be historical at the same time.
Yeah. It's quite good to see that already talking about alternative markets. The president has just really have gone on a crusade in the Asian market. He just concluded his state visit in the ASEAN countries as well. He went to Indonesia. Vietnam was one of the countries. Yeah. Also, they brought in a strong delegation as well to say we really want to look for business alternative market here in the continent, showing that very well true to his. Goal of attracting investment foreign direct investment in the country, but also this will also bode well for the African continent as well.
And just the fact that we call this Ubuntu Radio. I mean, this is the philosophy of this conference and the summit, right? Yeah. It's the philosophy of Ubuntu. I am because we are. Yeah. And I think that symbolism is not lost on the leaders that are here, the delegations that are in attendance to this summit. And you can see that they appreciate that so much because it talks about a collective shared humanity. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's some of the words that we have been hearing, both in the engagement groups, but also we heard it at the social summit. And we heard it a lot about that collectiveness. And I think that represents the fact that the world of 1945 has now become a world of collective humanity. Yeah. And we can't be talking about a particular level of an international system that doesn't recognize, include, but also become much more engaging around this shared humanity.
Well, because the G20 is really not an organization where it's got a secretariat for to make sure that some of the issues agreed upon are quickly implemented, to make sure that there's follow-ups and all that. How are they going to make sure that it's going to be easier to reach a consensus, finding each other on issues of solidarity, issues of empowerment, be it on women, because we've had a plethora of working groups, right? Look, there's women, there's youth, there's the disability. We just emerged from a social summit as well. They've got a huge document of proposal and the declaration to say that the president received. To say these are some of the issues, please consider this, let the leaders consider this. Are we going to reach the declaration on some of the key issues here? Are they going to find each other?
I think you and I both want to be a fly in that room right now,
Absolutely.
Right? Because I think they're beginning to bring these discussions now into a kind of collective context. And this is where it all comes down to right now. And I think it's been interesting because we've been hearing throughout the year that at certain of the engagement group discussions or certain of the discussions in the finance track, that there have been objections to certain terms being used. We don't like that term. We don't like this term. We want to basically change that term. And this means that South Africa had to navigate this in a very mature but respectful way to all the people who have differences of opinion about particular engagement groups. So, in the social summit, we had to be also cognizant and we had to be respectful and recognize that there are indigenous communities across the world, that they have a right and a voice and an agency to be heard, and they want to be heard and they want to be included. Similarly with the disability, people living with disabilities. I mean, they were very vocal about the fact that their disability has to be recognized, not just as a kind of add-on, but to be recognized in a much more astute way, and they call for action in their kind of interventions that they made at the social summit. Was that we call for action that we want a disability 20. So I think the fact of the matter is that all of this now has to be packaged in a way that makes those communities, because we live in a shared humanity, but we also live in societies that have very differentiations around how cultural issues are looked at, and we have to take that recognition into consideration. So I think it's going to be interesting. So how do you keep this on the radar? I think there's going to be, if I'm not mistaken, I think one of the things that would be very useful and could get consensus on an issue like this in this room right now is a monitoring track of what needs to go forward. You're always not going to have agreement. What do the BRICS say? We are governed by the right to agree to disagree, right? But one of the things that comes out of WTO language, and I think it's coming into this language that may be presented here today at the summit in this closed session, is special but differentiated responsibilities. So you kind of now have to think about the world as not just one particular set of actors, but it's about that language that comes out of the WTO, especially the language that came out of the WTO by the small island states, Jamaica, Caribbean, who talked about the special but differentiated responsibilities.
It's quite interesting, and indeed. I mean, when we conclude, a lot of people will reflect back on the non-participation of the United States, in terms of what it meant. Some say it's a missed opportunity for them, but it was long coming. Some will say it was long coming. Some will say, no, we take it as it comes as far as the United States is concerned. As one of the biggest economy, what would you advise President Ramaphosa in terms of how she'll be navigating that relationship going forward? Take it as it comes?
We've took a lot of body blows this year. And it didn't just start with the Trump presidency. We've been navigating this relationship and the terseness of this relationship for a while now. It starts off in the Biden administration. And I think we've shown our maturity, we've shown our respect, we've shown our diplomacy, and we still had to take the body blows. I think going forward, I mean, for me, what has happened and what has transpired in the course of our presidency of the G20 is that we've recognized that this world is never going to be a place of equality at times, but you've got to fight for your voice, you've got to fight for your agency, and you've got to fight for your representation. And we've done that. And we are recognized. Yeah. And that you can't take away from us. Absolutely. We are affirmed. You can't take that away from us. I think what we have to be very clear about is the actions of the U.S., and I say this with the most amount of humility. I'm not attacking the U.S., but the actions of the U.S. has now opened the door for other countries to do the same. And so when you take on that presidency next year, or at the 1st of December, depending who's taking it, who's going to take the gavel, right, is that you've got to be prepared for what you're going to do. So for me, I think we've done what we've done. We've done it in a mature, respectful, in a world where we understand that it's not always going to be easy, but we've done it within that space. And let the US take it on, and then we'll deal with it. If they don't want to invite us, they don't invite us. But remember that you may have other friends in the room that may actually then say, hang on, USA, we don't think this is how you play the game. I think what you're really seeing now is that there's a sense of, for me, is deep down there's this question around how do we go about with this trust and agency.
Well, it's an issue of trust, and I think that's where we're going to leave it. Sanusha Naidu, let me thank you so much for your time being available to give us some analysis, really a perspective, and what is likely to shape up into the declaration. We're hoping we'll get into that as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's how we concluded.
Cool. Happy.
Lovely. I'm very happy.
Let me sit for 5 minutes. I think they're going to come running after me. Yeah. I mean, I think the point here as well is that the US has showed its hand. And by showing its hand, it's now